Hi everybody, it's Rick. Before I get started on this, I wanted to just kind of give a little background. This you can see was done in 2010. It was a joint presentation with me and Tom. I cut Tom's piece out. I mean, maybe he has it on his YouTube channel, but I will be referring back to things he said. He had a really good discussion on risk management, but I really wanted to kind of highlight the topic that I was going through here, and also didn't want to make it an hour long. The other thing is the sound quality, because I converted this from Windows Media file to an MP4 before putting it into iMovie, isn't that good. I hopefully try to clean up a little bit, but you'll get used to it after a while. There's a little bit of an echo to it, so I just want to give that preamble before we get going.
I'm going to talk about the application of some of these risk management practices and these philosophies that Tom talked about. As cybersecurity has kind of become in the forefront in the media and in a lot of our organizations, we're finding that it's getting to be very tough to manage. And the real answer is what Tom talked about, and that's by prioritizing your risk and understanding how it impacts your business or the mission of your organization. And so what I've been using recently in the last 6 months as an analogy, something I came up with on a plane to do another presentation, was cybersecurity is very much like playing the game Plants vs. Zombies. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this game. It happens to be my favorite time waster when I'm sitting on a long flight. But let me describe it to you. You have zombies that are persistent, coming from the right side of the screen, trying to get into your house. And what you are supposed to do is use the different tools that you have to be able to prevent them from doing that. You have tools like these walnuts that can degrade or disrupt their march across your lawn. You have these pea shooters which will shoot at them to, eventually knock the buckets off their head or knock them down. And you have to manage these different tools by having the sun created by the sunflowers be used to be able to purchase them and then place them strategically. So you need to prioritize where you place these, when you place them, the type of tools you use, and what tools you use to be able to effectively defend your enterprise or your house or your brains in this matter, from a very persistent adversary. So that's why I want to describe to you what advanced persistent threat really is. APT in this year has really come to be something that everyone is talking about, and a lot of people aren't fully understanding. It started when Google first talked about their Aurora incident, and they called advanced persistent threat. Well, there's unique things about this type of adversary that's more of a campaign-based intrusion that I want to describe to you, and then I want to talk about what it's really not. So in my business, it's very specific what it is, and so some of the things are defined by the words themselves. So what's advanced about it? Advanced, they're using unreported exploits oftentimes. Now, this doesn't mean that every time there is an intrusion that's used an unreported exploit, or one that we call a 0-day, that means it's APT, but that's one of the characteristics. The other is some other types of malware that isn't detected by any virus. APT tries to be part of the normal, not part of the anomaly, because its whole mission is very campaign focused. It's not, I'm just trying to come in like a traditional financial hacker, let's say, knock over the plant, grab what they want, run out the door, probably put the lamp back up, and leave some marks, leave some evidence. These very persistent adversaries are very slow and patient, and they will take their time because they're goal-oriented. So you'll look at different vectors that might be traditionally used by financial or cyber criminal adversaries, and they will be very interactive, whereas if you put a countermeasure in place, they will respond very quickly to be able to try to get around it. So their technique is to escalate their intrusion as they need to, and not necessarily start off with their best weapons first, for lack of a better example. The persistent characteristic is, as I said, these are very patient people because they are oftentimes focused on a specific goal to, gather information about your intellectual property from an espionage standpoint, or trade secrets, or corporate secrets, or national secrets. they will diversify themselves within the organization so that they can remain their persistent. So just like Tom was talking about, continuity of operations is an important thing in a risk management profile to make sure that your operations can always be running during any adverse effect. They do the same thing. They have multiple places, so when you do discover them and you block the one entry point, they already have a number of other ones available to them. And then when we talk about from a threat standpoint, it is often their target is they're taking the path of least resistance, which in any system is the human. So extorting them, social engineering, probably with a spear phishing attack, which means an adversary may target an email directly to me because of my role in the organization, attempting me to go to a website that will have some malicious code to download and infect my system, or attach a document and from a trusted source that I may want to be open to infect my system. So they will go directly after the person to be able to get a foothold, and then we'll talk about what they do from there and where it gets to achieving their goals. But in the way that we kind of manage this from a risk standpoint or a remediation plan is we're focusing on the individual itself, because there's a lot of technology and there's a lot of different things. And as Tom had pointed out, there's a difference between threat, which is a potential, and a vulnerability, which is a technical thing. We're going to differentiate that and focus on the people aspect from a remediation standpoint. Because in your business and my business, our slogan is we never get who we're working for, and neither do the bad guys. And we all are targets in this as cyber citizens because everybody has, intellectual property or some access to somebody. You may be a small company or small organization, but you may have links to a larger organization, federal or other type of law enforcement organization, which might therefore make you a target. Now, as I say this, I want to, follow up on and enforce what Tom was talking about from risk. Risk, according to Webster's and NIST apparently, who takes similar to, is the probability or possibility of an adverse action of being happen, theft or loss in Webster's definition. Where security, which is you probably feel less secure based on what I was just saying about these advanced adversaries and their capabilities and how they're low and slow and they're like ninjas getting in and you don't even know about it. But what I did is I decreased your feeling, and security is an emotion. It is the freedom from fear or anxiety, where, however, in reality, I've reduced your risk because now that your awareness of these types of threats, you can be more conscientious about what you do to reduce your risk. So I think it's very important to kind of separate, do I feel secure, or more importantly in remediation, am I doing something that is really just making me feel better, but I'm not really reducing my risk? So I mentioned before that APT campaigns are not about being, anomaly. So that's why traditional security technology isn't going to find them, because they're going to use standard ports. I'm getting a little technical here. They're going to use standard packaging. They're going to use standard file names. It's not going to be too big or too small. It's not going to be a lot of traffic or a little traffic. It's not going to a location that's known to be a bad neighborhood. It might be going to a trusted site that was already compromised. So these are all things that make sure that traditional security systems don't flag that, hey, there's something I need to do some more research on. So we need to come up with more advanced techniques to be able to identify based on behavior. And some of the behavior is what I list here. We're focusing on the people. What do the people on the other side of the keyboard, on the other side of the world or northern of us or wherever it might be, what are they actually doing? They're patient, they're concealing their actions, they're going to attempt to get, a higher level access and be able to, multiply that around the organization. So this is what they're doing. And as Sun Tzu says in The Art of War, don't attack the enemy, attack their strategy. This is their strategy. Now what can we do to be able to help remediate that? And it's very similar to Plants vs. Zombies again. We know their strategy is to walk very slowly and zombie-like across the lawn to try to get to the left side of the screen. So knowing that that's their strategy, we can then put up defenses and have certain things to be aware of when they're coming and what they're doing and how fast they are to be able to, disrupt them, degrade them, or in some cases for those people who know this game, there's things to deceive them as well. And so that's what we're going to leverage. Because as they increase the advancing of their attacks, so for instance, they may do things like this bungee zombie, who will come behind my defenses and pull out one of my my technical controls, and I didn't have a defense for that. Or float over top of them like this balloon zombie does and then drop in behind my defenses because they're reacting to what I do as well, very similar to the real world. We have Zamboni zombies who will just kind of crash over certain things we have, which might be analogous to a distributed denial of service. And then some of the more sneaky are these digger zombies. How they work in the game is they dig underneath all of the controls, pop up, and then start eating them backwards. Now, as you look at this and we talk about risk, we also need to then prioritize, like Tom said. So to me, the balloon zombie is a higher priority because I don't have any controls to be able to stop him, and he is floating over my defenses very easily. Whereas, for instance, the digger zombie is very worrisome to me because he's taking out my controls, but he's going in a different direction. So if I need to say, get the balloon first, the Zamboni second, the bungee third, and then I can get to the digger zombie there. Now, I'm going to give you just now that Tom did such a great lead-in on risk, I'm saving 2 minutes talking about that here. So here's the risk calculation similar to what Tom talked about. But what I added in is the target value, because an asset could be data, it could be something with a physical value, but that value is pretty fixed. And what's interesting is a lot of times companies don't understand what has value, or that asset may not have value to you, but may have value to an adversary. So, for instance, your email list of all of your employees of a very large company will have value to someone who wants to send spam, but it doesn't have a monetary value to you, which, in my experience back in the day, is very tough to try to get law enforcement, what's the value of the theft when there's been a breach and they took all how do you know? They took all of your email addresses. What's the monetary loss of that? But the value is pretty fixed. And if I want to reduce my risk, I could reduce my value, but I really can't, physically do that unless I dilute all of my assets. So next on the calculation is the vulnerability. And as Tom said, vulnerability is more of the technical, so these are the bugs, the programming errors, the things that might be exploited, that can then reduce your risk. Now, it's very expensive and it's also very tough to be able to focus on reducing this part of the calculation because it's an unknown. A lot of the software and a lot of the hardware are things that are made by other people, and things may pop up that you don't know about. So then the last thing we can really do to reduce our risk is look at the threat. And the threat is the potential. And in this case, it's the people. So to me, APT is about people trying to achieve their objectives to the decrement of the organization. So if we break out what the people can do, a person needs an opportunity, a capability, and intent. So the more that I can understand their intent, the better I can prioritize, like the difference between the balloon zombie and the digger zombie. If I can, kind of remove their opportunity by having a secure perimeter and having layered security that, lets them know that they don't have an opportunity because my staff have all been trained and monitored and things like that, that reduction then reduces my overall risk calculation at the left. And then the capability. What are their capabilities? Can I degrade their capability? Or can I perhaps make things harder for them, which will then increase the cost of the intrusion? Because the more that I can make pain for them, that they have to get better and better and better, the lower my risk becomes, because not all of them will rise up. They'll just kind of go to the next person on the block to be able to go to. So the objective in the threat-focused risk reduction is erode the capability of the individual to increase the cost of their intrusion, and then by understanding their intent will better help us prioritize. So the tool that we've come up with to be able to do that is a cyber threat kill chain. Now, it's called a kill chain because that's borrowed from the military. Whether you're in the Navy or the Army, there's certain, an OODA loop or an FT2TEA, which I won't explain, but those are certain traditional kill chains from the military. So we have a cyber kill chain, knowing that there are 7 gated steps that a intruder will need to go through to finally act on their objectives, whether their objective is to exfiltrate sensitive data or corrupt, disrupt, or destroy the data or the capability of a system. So the first is the reconnaissance. They need to understand the environment, the weaponization of a payload that will then be delivered into the environment exploit either a human or a vulnerability on a technical machine, install on that machine to give yourself a foothold to take command and control, and then finally act on your objectives. Now, the objectives might be to find the data I've been looking for and pull it out, or now that I'm in a new enclave, go back to the beginning and start all over and go back through my chain to eventually get to my objective. But for us, this gives us control because I'm attacking their strategy. I know this is their strategy. And if I can get within their decision loop to be able to identify them. So, for instance, if they come and I see that they tried to deliver some malicious payload and I caught it, I can then synergize down and say, well, what was that payload going to do? It was going to exploit this operating system. It would have installed this malware. It was going to take this command and control channel. And then this is ultimately, I may or may not know what the objectives were, but I found a lot of information just by catching it. The adversary didn't know that it was blocked. He doesn't know why it was blocked or whether it was successful or not. But then we learned a lot about that. So as I've been learning as I'm developing training courses that you need to repeat things to make sure that it sticks. So what I have is a nice diagram to go through this in a little bit more animated detail. So reconnaissance. This reconnaissance might be through open source, looking at information about the organization. It might be through talking to people or trying to get information, or it might be reconnaissance gathered from other intrusions. So the next phase is the weaponization. This might be something they outsource. It might be a certain zero-day exploit or malware that is traditionally used in the cybercrime world or traditionally used in the espionage world, and it might be shared otherwise, or they might create it themselves. But that weaponization, would then have to be delivered. So let's say another group delivers this, typically through perhaps an email with a rogue attachment on it, or linking to a website that has rogue content to infect the machine who visits that site. That content will then exploit and then install on the machine. Exploit could be exploiting the person to click a link, or it could be exploiting a vulnerability in the operating system or the browser. That installation, and one of the reasons why we separate these from a defensive standpoint is I might be able to block the exploit, or I might be able to block the installation. And so, depending on what those technically are, I can have better control of that. And then finally, the person takes command and control of this device that they now have inside this network, and then they can then start trying to cross horizontally across the network to figure out what they want. And let's say it's capture this specific data and exfiltrate it out. So this is what they need to do. And they can't skip any steps. I can't just deliver anything without understanding where I'm going and what I'm going to do to it. And the command and control channel is not something I can just magically have. I can't automatically just set it up. I need to get something inside to install to be able to do that. And so the more that they do and the more we understand, the more we can start tracking these indicators for specific types of adversaries or specific campaigns to be able to know when they came back. And there's a lot of information that we have on these to be able to help in that. But the beauty is no matter where I block it, I block their capability. So their objective is to exfiltrate data. If I catch them on exploit or catch them on delivery, or even if I catch them on command and control, they didn't get to their objective, and I won. So there was in the media and in a lot of reports, we talk about this asymmetric battle that we're in, where we're getting rope-a-dope by these adversaries that are very persistent. We can't fight back, and they have to be right only once, and we have to be right every single time. Well, this kind of turns the tables on that, where they, to be successful, would need to change every single aspect of how they do it, and the behavior in which they do it, for us not to catch them at one of these stages. And we just need to catch them at one stage, and then no matter where we catch it. So let's say we caught them on command and control because there was a command and control channel that was encoded using an algorithm that we knew, an encoding algorithm that we'd seen before. We catch it and we block it. Then we can go back and we can say, how was it installed? What was the exploit they used? What was the delivery mechanism? Is there any fingerprints on the weaponization for the payload? And was there anything I can go back and look and see if this particular adversary, went to the website before or anything else? So this really gives us a lot of intelligence about, who the adversaries are. So going back to the game, the same works on these guys. Understanding who they are as individuals, the zombie, the balloon zombie, the digger zombie, the guy with the pole vault jumping over the walnuts, the guy with the ladder, or the gargantuan who launches his little imp inside your defenses. Understanding what they're going to do will make it a lot easier for me to be able to defend against it and know when they're coming and to be able to get inside their decision loop. The other benefit of the framework is that it kind of helps you prioritize, because if I catch something in command and control, I know they're one step away from their objective. Whereas if I catch something higher up, I had a little bit more time, and there might be times where, some way may choose to bring them in a little bit further to learn more about what they're trying to do, to learn more how to stop them better later. But as you get better at it, you start catching it higher and higher up, which is farther and farther away from their objective and a lot less risky for you. The other thing is, by gathering all this information, you kind of see, how are they coming in? What are they looking for? What are the vectors? Is it for the remote workers? Is it through wireless? Is it through internet? Are they focusing on the applications? Are they focusing on the data storage? What is it that they're working on? So you can better educate your staff to be able to, enforce these better and have better controls and procedures around protecting them. So looking at, kind of what they do and how they do it, let's talk real quickly about, how it's changed. And so, I used to put this slide earlier, but I wanted to really get to the meat first, so you didn't have to wait for the payoff. And so it used to be that, adversaries would just kind of spoof emails, like, oh, this is coming from PayPal. But now they've gone to a more sophisticated method. It's referred to man in the mailbox, and that's where they will understand that you interact with a small vendor or partner that may not be as secure as you are. Or in this case, on the phone, you might be one of those. So they will then break into that organization, because security is usually not as robust, get into that person's machine, and then reply to an email that I had sent a couple days ago and say, oh, Rick, here's that up-to-date document we talked about. I'm sorry, the one I sent previously was wrong. And then that email would have some kind of malicious code or zero-day exploit on it. And I would have 100% trust, so of course I would open it. And so that's kind of the sophistication they've evolved to. The other vector is, removable media. They used to be doing cybercrime presentations for a long time. Always told the story about, hackers, putting rogue software on smart drives, on USB drives and scattering around the parking lot, or, giving them away at conferences, or what, that are being given away at conferences or something like that. Now, they're looking at more into the supply chain. Is it that, it's developed in this country, but where along the marketing group, the boxing group, the shipping group, where it's being stored, where along that chain could somebody have gone in and inserted something malicious? And we have a number of cases, if you, even just Google it, of very respectable vendors at conferences accidentally giving out USB drives that have malware on them. And then finally, from the website, it used to be that they would, we'll refer to whacking a site and copying it completely and then trying to lure you to that site. It looks very much like a bank site or some kind of e-commerce site to lure you to give your credit cards or personal information. Now, they're compromising those legitimate sites, and adding frames or adding fields to it so that it looks you are going to the real site, but because it's been compromised, it's referring to fields that are actually hosted on another server that you don't really see. And so they're getting more sophisticated as the education campaigns are working. The people know not to click links in emails and knows not to put in, USB drives they find in the street, and know not to go to look for certain things for websites. Now they're escalating their intrusion to be able to, take advantage of trust that we have based on the knowledge that we are being told. So trying to put it together to close is, on the left-hand side, we have the kill chain that our adversaries will use to be able to achieve their objective. But along the top, we have the things that I've kind of been mentioning casually when I talk about Plants vs. Zombies, detection and degrading and denying and disrupting, and these are, known as the 5 Ds. Destroy is another one, but we don't put that in because that's not something that we do. So if I can, for instance, disrupt the command and control, or deny the installation, or degrade the reconnaissance, or detect a delivery, or deceive a command and control or delivery, and I can find things within my organization to be able to have a process or some kind of control to be able to fill in these boxes. Now, I don't need to fill in all of them, just the ones I'm most comfortable with, to be able to, hey, maybe I can detect all these things and I want to be able to deny some of them, but I don't want to deny all of them, or I want to be able to disrupt it to get more information. And so by putting this grid together gives me more control over what the adversary is going to try to do in an intrusion, and therefore I can then prioritize what's important to me so that I can protect the business or the mission of the organization, and then also be able to maintain my operations and manage my risk. And that's where it boils down to, because, you know, it's not unlike Plants vs. Zombies, where I'm trying to mitigate my risk, and unlike Plants vs. Zombies, the risk is a little bit different. So, as Tom had mentioned, assessing and understanding how to evaluate the risk management, how effective it is. One of the tools is used, and it's a very simple one, so we're happy to share it, is taking that kill chain and putting it on its side. And I don't have a lot of time to go over this slide, but essentially across, on the left-hand side, we have different campaigns that we have identified and blocked, attributed and blocked. And then across the top, we have an early warning, defensive, technical, or procedural control, inbound protection, other detection and correlation method, outbound protection, and then, potential future activities that we may do. And any box that has a white dot is where we had blocked this particular campaign. So if we look at the very first one, we blocked it through a blocking we had in the email. So on delivery, we had blocked it. However, the other blocks that were filled in are blocks that either contributed to that or also would have remediated this intrusion. So there was a desktop antivirus would have caught it anyway, or the uncategorized web proxy block would have caught it anyway, or some other things. And so we want stuff more to the left, but we also want to see how effective all of the other controls we have are on the right. So if we look at something like the SIM product, which is a correlation of all of the logs, we see that's used pretty much down the middle and right in the middle of this slide. So that's a real effective control. And, so we want to see that all of the controls are working because it would have blocked it through the analysis we've done. And then proposing future controls, like taking admin rights away from all the users, that would have also blocked a lot of these as well. And that helps in justifying these new security controls, because technical people don't make business decisions. In an organization or in some kind of mission, the leaders are the ones who decide what they're supposed to do to manage the risk, not the technical people. But the technical people need to give them the data to make smart decisions. So this is the way where our technical folks provide the information to our leadership, provide guidance to them that, hey, maybe we want to take admin rights away from everybody. Here is the evidence of why it should be, but it's your decision to weigh based on, as Tom was saying, the risk-reward thing. Is there productivity? Do people install a lot of software? Is it going to require more staff? Et cetera, et cetera. So this is just one of the many ways that we use to kind of track the effectiveness. Other ways help us in forecasting how certain intrusions may happen based on other data, but didn't have enough time to go over that. So at the end of the day, you don't want the zombies to eat your brains. You don't want the intruders to get to your important information, or in this case, particularly with the critical infrastructure, disrupt or corrupt the critical infrastructure to, as Tom said, you probably don't generate your own electricity and your own water and your own telecommunication. You rely on other people for that. And so they have as much interest in you in managing your risk and their own individual risk. So with that, here is my contact information. The topic that I talk about a lot. I hope that you had some good information. And I guess at this point we will have some questions and answers.